You want to give me a present? Just stay away from my son's life forever. You're the worst mother-in-law he could ever have." The words sliced through the elegant murmur of the country club ballroom like a shard of crystal dropped on marble. The chandeliers above us glittered too brightly, the air thick with the scent of white roses and expensive perfume. Every head at the head table turned. The string quartet faltered for half a beat, the violinist's bow scraping an ugly note. The photographer's camera stopped clicking mid-shot. I, Vanessa Harper, 55 years old, stood there with my champagne flute trembling in my hand, the pale gold liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim and threatening to stain the mother of the groom gown I had saved 8 months to buy, one careful paycheck at a time. Nathan, my only child, looked as if someone had punched him in the stomach. His face, usually so composed, had gone slack with shock. His new wife, Camille, stood beside him in her cloud of white tulle, the cathedral-length veil trembling slightly with her quick, angry breaths. Her cheeks were flushed beneath layers of perfect bridal makeup, her eyes blazing with a mix of triumph and fury that made my chest tighten. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. The room was suddenly too bright, too hot, too full of strangers wearing the smug little smiles of people who had always suspected I didn't belong here, that my quiet accounting job and modest ranch house were proof I was lesser. My throat closed. The champagne tasted sour on my tongue. If my story resonates with you even a little, if you've ever felt pushed aside by the very people you loved most, please subscribe to the channel and stay with me. There are more stories like this one, and I don't want you to miss the next. Camille's voice rose again, sharp enough to cut glass. "Did you hear me, Vanessa? That would be the best gift you could give us. Disappear." Nathan finally found his tongue. "Camille, stop! This isn't the time." "No, Nathan, it is exactly the time." She turned to him, the long train of her dress sweeping the polished floor like an accusation, the silk rustling loud in the stunned silence. "I've been patient for 2 years. I've smiled while she corrected the seating chart, rewrote the menu, told the florist the roses were the wrong shade of blush. Tonight, she tried to move my grandmother away from the sweetheart table because the music might be too loud for her hearing aids. My grandmother who flew in from Paris for this wedding. My grandmother who wanted to sit next to me on my wedding day." Her voice cracked on the last word, but her eyes never left mine, glittering with something that felt like victory. I found my voice at last, low and steady despite the roaring in my ears and the way my pulse hammered against my ribs. "Camille, I only suggested the table by the terrace doors because the band is directly behind the sweetheart table. The sound engineer himself said the decibel level—" "See?" Camille laughed, a brittle, glittering sound that made several guests flinch. "This is what I live with. Every decision, every detail, she has an opinion. She acts like this is her wedding." She spread her arms wide, the diamond bracelet on her wrist catching the light and throwing tiny rainbows across the white tablecloths. Nathan's father, Gregory, cleared his throat from his seat at the Langford table, old Virginia money that made my life feel small and shabby by comparison. His mother, Evelyn, pressed her napkin to her lips with manicured fingers, her eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of someone whose worst suspicions had just been confirmed in front of 200 guests. I could almost hear her thinking, I knew she'd ruin everything. I felt every stare like pinpricks on my skin. The weight of 30 years of sacrifices settled on my shoulders all at once. The second jobs that left me bone-tired. The vacations I never took. The college fund I built one overtime shift at a time, while Nathan's father drank himself into an early grave and left us drowning in debt. My chest ached with the sudden, brutal clarity that none of it had been enough. "Camille," I said quietly, my voice barely carrying over the hum of whispered conversations, "let's take this somewhere private." "There's nothing private about it anymore," she snapped, stepping closer so the scent of her perfume, something expensive and French, filled my space. "You made sure of that when you humiliated me in front of my coordinator yesterday, and now tonight, on my wedding night, you're still trying to run everything." Nathan reached for her arm, his fingers brushing the lace of her sleeve. "Baby, please." She shook him off hard enough that her veil shifted. "No, I'm done pretending. Vanessa, if you really love Nathan, prove it. Give us the one thing we actually want. Stay away forever." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the ice melting in abandoned glasses, the soft clink as cubes settled. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, the sting of tears I refused to let fall. I set my champagne flute carefully on the cable, the crystal chiming softly against the wood. My hand did not shake anymore. "Very well," I said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, my voice steady even as something inside me cracked wide open. "Consider it done." Then I walked out of the ballroom with my head high, past the curious whisperers and the flashing cameras, past the wedding planner frozen in horror with her clipboard clutched to her chest, past Evelyn Langford's barely concealed smirk. The heavy oak doors closed behind me with a final, echoing thud that sounded like the end of everything I'd known. Only then, in the dim hush of the marble hallway, the air cool against my flushed skin, did I let the tears come. They were hot and silent, sliding down my cheeks as I pressed my back to the wall and tried to breathe through the ache that felt like drowning. If you've ever been told you're not wanted by the very people you gave everything for, you're not alone. Hit subscribe. Let's walk through this together. I drove home through the dark Virginia countryside, the road unspooling beneath my headlights like a ribbon I wanted to cut and be done with. The porch light was on a timer. The house looked small and lonely against the starlit sky. The familiar outline suddenly foreign, like it already belonged to someone else. Inside, everything was ready for tomorrow's gift-giving brunch I had offered to host, so the out-of-town guests wouldn't have to pay hotel prices for breakfast. The scent of lemon polish still hung in the air from the afternoon I'd spent on my hands and knees, making everything perfect. The dining table was already extended with both leaves, my mother's silver gleaming under the soft chandelier light. I had pressed the Irish linen tablecloth until not a single crease remained, the fabric crisp beneath my fingertips. I stood in the doorway and looked at the crystal vases waiting for grocery store flowers. The little favor boxes tied with satin ribbon that had taken me hours to curl just right. The welcome chalkboard that still read Harper Langford Wedding Weekend, Day 2, in my careful chalk lettering. My throat tightened again. All of it, every careful detail suddenly felt pathetic. My phone buzzed incessantly on the counter, lighting up with Nathan's name, Camille's name, the wedding planner, Evelyn. I silenced it without looking. The vibration against the granite like an angry heartbeat I no longer wanted to hear. I walked through the house touching things the way you do when you're saying goodbye to a life you didn't know was already over. My fingers trailed over the back of the couch where Nathan used to fall asleep during movie nights. The kitchen island where we'd eaten countless bowls of cereal at 2 a.m. when he was studying for the bar. The house smelled faintly of the vanilla candle I always burned when I was stressed, the scent now cloying and suffocating. In the hallway, I stopped beneath the gallery wall of photographs. Nathan's first steps, his scraped knees and gap-toothed grins, his high school graduation, the day he got accepted to UVA, the proud smile when he passed the bar exam. My fingerprints were on every milestone, every frame hung with care. I reached up and touched the glass over his college graduation photo, the one where he had his arms swung around my shoulders, both of us grinning like fools. On the back, in his handwriting, "To Mom, who made all of this possible, thank you for everything. I love you." My eyes burned. I took the frame off the wall, the nail left behind looking suddenly naked, and carried it to my bedroom like it was something fragile that might shatter. Then I opened my laptop, the blue light harsh against my tired eyes, and started typing. I didn't sleep. The hours blurred together, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat while I laid out 30 years of invisible sacrifices in neat,
merciless rose. By dawn, I had a plan, a timeline, and the calmest heart I'd felt in years, as if the storm inside me had finally broken and left something clear and cold in its wake. At 7:03 a.m., my phone showed 37 missed calls and 51 text messages. The most recent, from Nathan at 4:17 a.m. "Mom, please answer. Camille didn't mean it. She's just stressed. We can fix this." I stared at the screen until the words blurred, then set the phone face down. The morning light filtering through the curtains was pale and unforgiving, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny ghosts of every moment I'd spent making this house a home for someone who no longer wanted me in it. I showered, the hot water pounding against my shoulders, washing away the salt of dried tears and the faint traces of wedding perfume that still clung to my skin. I dressed in jeans that felt soft from too many washes, and a soft gray sweater that hung loose on my frame. I'd lost weight these last months without noticing, and packed a single overnight bag with the mechanical precision of someone preparing for battle. At 7:30, I called Gregory Langford, Nathan's father-in-law, retired partner at the most prestigious law firm in Richmond. My hands were steady on the wheel as I drove to the coffee shop down the street, needing to be anywhere but inside those four walls that suddenly felt like a museum of a life that had never truly been mine. "Vanessa?" His voice was cautious, the background hum of his espresso machine audible. "Is everything all right?" "No," I said pleasantly, stirring sugar into coffee I didn't want, watching the granules dissolve like all my careful plans. "But it will be. Gregory, I need to speak to Evelyn as well. Can you put me on speaker?" A rustle, the click of a button, then Evelyn's soprano, sharp as winter air. "Vanessa, really, this dramatics—" "Evelyn," I interrupted, my voice calm even as my pulse thrummed in my ears. "Last night, Camille asked me to disappear from their lives. I have decided to grant her request. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing all financial and logistical support for anything related to Nathan and Camille." Silence so complete, I could hear the faint ticking of their grandfather clock through the phone. I continued, each word measured, tasting like metal on my tongue. "That includes the property at 24 Sycamore Lane, currently occupied by your son and my daughter-in-law." Evelyn found her voice first, shrill with disbelief. "You can't possibly—" "I can and I am. The house is still titled solely in my name. I allowed them to live there rent-free as an engagement gift, with the understanding I would transfer title after the wedding. That will no longer happen. The house goes on the market tomorrow. They have until 5 p.m. Tuesday to vacate." Gregory cleared his throat, the sound of a man trying to regain control. "Vanessa, be reasonable. They just got married. Where are they supposed to go?" "I'm sure 2 attorneys with 6-figure salaries can figure something out," I said sweetly, watching steam curl from my untouched coffee. "They managed to plan a $120,000 wedding without noticing that every single vendor contract is in my name and paid from my accounts." Evelyn gasped, a sharp intake of breath that sounded almost theatrical. "That's absurd. We contributed." "You contributed the champagne toast and the rehearsal dinner venue. Total $18,400. I have the receipts. The remaining $104,312 came from my retirement savings and the home equity line on this house." I let that settle, let them feel the weight of numbers they couldn't argue with, the way my father had taught me long ago. "And additionally," I continued, my voice never wavering, "I have canceled the gift-giving brunch scheduled for this morning. The caterer, the string trio, and the rental company have all been paid their cancellation fees. You're welcome to host something yourselves if you wish." Gregory tried again, his tone shifting to the patient condescension men like him reserve for hysterical women. "Vanessa, this is rash. Camille was upset. Camille made her feelings crystal clear in front of 200 witnesses, and I'm simply respecting her wishes. I ended the call before they could respond, my finger trembling slightly as I pressed the red button. The coffee shop around me felt suddenly too loud, too bright, the scent of burnt rounds and cinnamon rolls cloying in my throat. Next, I phoned Claire, the realtor who had sold me the Sycamore Lane house 15 years ago. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm with congratulations I no longer wanted. "Vanessa Harper, I heard Nathan got married yesterday. Congratulations." "Thank you, Claire," I said, staring out the window at the ordinary Tuesday morning traffic. "I'm calling because I need to list 24 Sycamore Lane immediately. Cash offers preferred. I'd like it active by tomorrow morning." A pause, long enough for me to hear her shift in her chair. "The house your son and his wife are living in?" "Yes." Another pause, heavier this time. "All right. I can be there at 11 to take photos if the current occupants are amenable." "They'll be amenable," and the certainty in my voice surprised even me. By 9:30, I had spoken to every vendor from yesterday's wedding, my fingers cramping from holding the phone so tightly, confirming cancellation fees were paid and contracts terminated. The wedding planner, Margot, actually cried, her voice breaking over the line as she begged me to reconsider, as if tears could rebuild what had been shattered. At 10:15, the doorbell rang, a sharp, insistent sound that made my heart lurch. I opened it to find Nathan on my front step, still in the same rumpled tuxedo shirt and trousers, the bow tie long gone, his eyes red and shadowed, hair wild as if he'd been pulling at it all night. "Mom?" he cracked on the single word, raw and broken. "What is happening?" Behind him, Camille stood on the walkway in yoga pants and one of Nathan's old UVA hoodies, arms wrapped around herself as if holding herself together, her face blotchy from crying or rage or both. The morning sun caught the diamond on her left hand, throwing fractured light across the porch.
I stepped aside, the air between us thick with everything unsaid. "Come in." They entered like children sent to the principal's office, moving with the careful steps of people who no longer felt welcome. Camille's gaze darted to the dining room, the extended table, the favor boxes, the chalkboard, and her mouth twisted, a flash of something that might have been guilt or triumph. I couldn't tell anymore. Nathan spoke first, his voice hoarse. "Mom, please, Camille didn't mean what she said. She was overwhelmed." "I heard exactly what she meant," I said, and the words tasted like ash, but I didn't look away. "And I'm honoring it." Camille found her voice then, smaller than I'd ever heard it. "You can't sell our house. We've lived there for 18 months. We've made it ours." Her fingers worried the sleeve of Nathan's hoodie, twisting the fabric until it bunched. "No," I corrected gently, though my heart ached at the sight of her standing there, so young and so certain she'd been right. "You've lived there rent-free while I paid the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, the renovations you begged for. The title is still in my name only. I checked with my attorney this morning." Nathan's face went white, the color draining so completely I thought he might be sick. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't—" I gestured to the kitchen table where neat folders waited like evidence in a trial, the morning light slanting across them in harsh, unforgiving bars. "Sit down, both of you." They sat, the chairs scraping against the tile with a sound that made me flinch. I opened the first folder slowly, my fingers steady now, each movement deliberate. "Includes wedding expenses. Total, $122,712. All contracts in my name, all paid from my accounts. Including the venue deposit you told Evelyn was a joint gift from both families." Camille flushed dark red, her gaze fixed on the table as if she could will the papers away. Second folder. Education. Nathan's undergraduate degree after his father died and left us drowning in debt.
$187,000. Bar exam prep courses, interview suits, the signing bonus you used for your honeymoon, all me. My voice caught on the last word just for a moment, remembering the pride I'd felt watching him walk across that stage, thinking that it had all been worth it. Nathan looked sick. His hands clenched on the table until the knuckles went white. Third folder. 24 Sycamore Lane, purchased 15 years ago for $485,000. Current market value approximately $1.4 million. Mortgage balance $312,000. All payments made by me, while you paid exactly $0 toward housing. I slid the preliminary listing agreement across the table, the paper whispering like a secret finally told. Claire will be there at 11 tomorrow for photos. You have until Tuesday at 5. Camille surged to her feet so fast her chair rocked. This is insane! You can't just throw us out on the street! Her voice cracked, and for a moment, she looked impossibly young, the girl who had once asked me to help pick out her wedding dress because her own mother was too critical. You have jobs, I said calmly, though my heart twisted at the fear in her eyes. You have savings. You have Gregory and Evelyn, who I'm sure will be delighted to help now that the truth is out. Nathan's voice was barely a whisper, broken and small. Mom, please don't do this. I looked at my son, my beautiful, brilliant boy who had once fallen asleep on my chest every night for 3 years straight, his tiny fingers curled around mine, and felt something inside me finally settle into place, hard and irrevocable. Last night, your wife told me the greatest gift I could give you was to disappear from your lives. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. Camille's phone buzzed in her pocket, shrill and insistent. She glanced at it and her face crumbled completely, tears spilling over without warning. Evelyn just texted. She wants us to come over now. Nathan stood slowly, his movements careful, like a man waking from a nightmare he wasn't sure was over. Mom, go, I said, and my voice was gentle now, almost kind. You have a lot to discuss with your in-laws, and only 4 days to pack. They left without another word. The door closed softly behind them, the sound so final it echoed in my bones. I locked it, the deadbolt sliding home with a quiet, satisfying click, poured myself a cup of coffee I didn't taste, and for the first time in 32 years, the house was perfectly, blessedly quiet. That small moment, turning the deadbolt after they walked out, was my first taste of revenge. Not loud, not cruel, but just the quiet click of a boundary finally snapping into place, the sound of a door closing on a life I had outgrown. The next 4 days passed in a blur of activity that felt both frantic and strangely serene. Nathan texted constantly, anger, bargaining, pleading, each message a fresh wound I refused to reopen. Camille alternated between hysterical voicemails that cracked my heart and stony silence to hurt even more. Evelyn left 2 frosty messages demanding I be reasonable, her voice dripping with the entitlement of a woman who had never been told no. Gregory tried the legal route, his threats polite but pointed, until my attorney reminded him, calmly and in writing, that everything was perfectly legal. Claire listed the house on Thursday morning. By Thursday evening, we had 7 cash offers above asking price, the notifications pinging my phone like gunfire. I accepted the highest, an investor couple who planned to flip it, their excitement palpable even through email. Closing scheduled for the following Friday, 14 days away. On Tuesday at 4:57 p.m., a moving truck pulled away from 24 Sycamore Lane. I watched from my car across the street, hidden behind tinted windows and the ordinary anonymity of a baseball cap. Nathan carried the last box himself, his shoulders bowed under the weight. He paused on the front porch, the same porch where he'd learned to ride a bike, where I'd waited up for him on prom night, and looked around as if memorizing the place, the dogwood tree in bloom, the way the light fell through the magnolia leaves. Then he locked the door and slipped the key through the mail slot as instructed. He never saw me. I sat there long after the truck disappeared, tears sliding silently down my cheeks for the boy he'd been and the man he'd become without me. That night, I transferred half the expected proceeds from the upcoming sale into a brokerage account, earmarked for a condominium I'd already put under contract on the Outer Banks, a fourth-floor unit with a wide balcony facing the Atlantic, the photos showing nothing but blue water and possibility. The other half I donated anonymously to a scholarship fund for children of single parents pursuing higher education. The confirmation email felt like absolution. On Wednesday, I hosted a small going-away coffee for my neighbors and coworkers in the backyard I'd tended for 25 years. I told them I was retiring early and moving to the beach to finally write the novel I'd been talking about for 2 decades. They toasted me with grocery store champagne and tears in their eyes, hugging me like I was embarking on an adventure instead of whirling from ruins. No one except my attorney and my closest friend Susan knew the real story. Susan held my hand while I cried that night, the first time I'd let myself break completely, her quiet presence the only thing keeping me from shattering. Friday morning, exactly 1 week after the wedding, I signed the closing papers for the sale of Sycamore Lane in my attorney's office. The investor wired the funds immediately. My bank balance had never contained so many zeros. I stared at the screen for a long time, waiting for triumph or relief, but feeling only a hollow sort of peace. That afternoon, I loaded my SUV with the few things I wanted to keep. Books whose pages still smelled like the nights I'd read them to Nathan, photographs I couldn't bear to leave behind, my mother's china carefully wrapped in the same newspaper I'd used when I moved in here 30 years ago, the quilt I'd sewn for Nathan's crib from scraps of his baby clothes, each square a memory I wasn't ready to release. I left the ranch house staged and sparkling for its new owners, a young couple expecting their first child. They'd close next week, bringing new life to rooms that had known too much ending. Before I pulled out of the driveway for the last time, I took the framed graduation photo off the wall, the one with Nathan's inscription on the back. My fingers traced the words one final time, the ink slightly faded but still clear. I slipped it into a padded envelope along with a single sheet of heavy cream stationery, my handwriting careful and final. Nathan and Camille, you got your wedding gift after all. The house is gone, the financial support is gone, the constant advice, the emergency kits, the late-night calls, the open door, all gone. I hope the space I've left in your lives feels as clean and wide as you wished it to be. Be kinder to the next person who loves you without condition. Vanessa. I mailed it from the post office with no return address, the envelope heavy in my hand. Then pointed my car east, toward the ocean, and didn't look back. The road stretched ahead, unfamiliar and terrifying, and mine. The first month at the beach was a revelation, each day a small miracle of ordinary freedom. I woke each morning to the sound of waves instead of worry, the salt air slipping through the open windows like a promise. I walked 4 miles every day along the hard-packed sand, my footprints washed away before I turned back, the rhythm of the tide teaching me how to let go. I cooked only what I felt like eating, simple things that tasted like possibility. Shrimp sautéed with garlic, tomatoes still warm from the morning market. I made friends with the widow next door, Marjorie, who brought me fresh figs from her tree and stories of a life that had also required reinvention. I joined a writers' group that met in a bookstore smelling of salt and old paper, reading my hesitant pages aloud to women who nodded like they understood. I took up paddleboarding, even though I fell in constantly, the cold shock of the water making me laugh harder than I had in years. The sound of my own joy startling gulls into flight. Nathan tried to reach me twice. Once through Susan, who gently told him I wasn't ready. Once by showing up at the old house and discovering it belonged to someone else. He left a voicemail from an unknown number that I listened to exactly once, his voice cracking as he begged me to let him fix this. I saved the message, then deleted it, my finger hovering over the button longer than I wanted to admit. Some fractures can't be mended with a single phone call. Some wounds need the salt of distance to heal. 6 months later, on a crystalline October morning that smelled of wood smoke and possibility, I sat on my balcony with coffee and watched a pod of dolphins arc through the water, their sleek bodies catching the light like silver coins tossed into the sea. My phone buzzed with an email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject: Thank you. Mrs. Harper, my name is Elena Ramirez. My husband Marco and I bought your house on Sycamore Lane last year. We had our daughter Sophia in the front bedroom in July, the one with the big oak tree outside the window. I found an envelope wedged behind the built-in bookcase when we were installing new shelves. It has your name on it, and inside is a photograph and a note. I won't read the note, it feels private, but I wanted you to know it's here whenever you're ready. With gratitude for the home you made possible, Elena. I stared at the screen for a long time, the dolphins forgotten, the coffee cooling in my hand. The past, patient and persistent, had found me across miles and months. Then I opened a new email and typed a single line, my fingers steady on the keys. Please keep it. That chapter is closed. I hit send, closed the laptop, and walked down to the water. The tide was coming in, washing the sand clean with every wave, relentless and forgiving. I stepped into the foam and let it swirl around my ankles, cold and alive, and new. I was 56 years old, financially secure, healthier than I'd been in decades, and finally, completely free. The worst mother-in-law anyone could have? Perhaps to them. To me, I had become the woman who finally learned that love doesn't require self-erasure, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the space to feel the full weight of their own choices. If you've ever had to walk away to save yourself, leave me a comment below. Tell me your story. You're not alone. And if this journey touched you, subscribe. There are so many more stories to tell. Stories of women who chose themselves when no one else would. I'll see you in the next one.